I applaud Jessica for going out there. You know what I mean? For going out there and fighting the good fight and then quitting for a day or a week or a month and then waking up 31 days later and saying, you know what? Let's do it again. Because, man, and just dealing with garbage people. You never know who's going to be a garbage person, but you can't not deal with anyone because out there is your not garbage person and you have to find that person. And some people argue you've got to find them. Some people argue that person will find you. But man, there's a lot of garbage people in between.
Yet another exciting episode of Time Well Spent with Ronald, the podcast nobody asked for, yet somebody is listening to. Let's get right to it. That was my friend Michael, aka Mass Potential. We worked together on another podcast called Talking Loud and Saying Nothing, which you should check out at some point when you're not listening to this podcast. I asked Mass to chime in with some reactions to my last episode of Time Well Spent entitled No Rules. Now let me just stop and say that if you haven't had the chance to listen to that episode, you might want to go back and check it out. Mass will make some references to the stories told in that episode. Mass and I have talked about dating extensively in several mediums, whether it was on 10 Minutes with Ronald, on Talking Loud and Saying Nothing, or just no mics venting about dealing with our experiences trying to find the one. He seemed like the right person to include in the conversation when it came to dealing with dating from a man's perspective. Now, while you'll notice he does give quality insight, he's not exactly equipped to talk about being active in the dating world as he's currently in a relationship. That's right, my dating expert is now off the market. I think it's ironic. However, I'm almost positive I never used the word ironic correctly, which is kind of ironic whilst talking about the definition of ironic. Anyway, here's Mike reflecting on dating and his thoughts on my sister's dating story from No Rules.
Dating sucks, man. I'm happy to not be kind of looking right now because I feel like kind of like the title of the episode. There aren't any rules, and I feel like a lot of it is very frustrating. Not having expectations of somebody who has no responsibility to you, and then having them crush those what you thought was going to happen or how you thought this was going to go, or at least what you thought a decent person would do if they're not interested. And then just having them get up and say, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then never come back, and then get up and say, I'm going to go to the bathroom, never come back, and then ask you if you're okay. Like, just leave it. If that's what you're going to do, then just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. All right, cool. You left me. That's cool. Never hear from you again. Never talk to you again. Cool. Don't ask me if I'm okay. You don't care if I'm okay. And if my response is, actually, as soon as you left, I was murdered. What are you going to say? Sorry to hear that. Like, what do you know what I mean? Also, how are you texting me from heaven? I don't know what you're going to say, but it's just, again, there's no rules. And when there's no rules, it's bedlam. That's like the definition of chaos, and dating is chaos.
In this world of chaos, we have to figure out who we are. In this segment, Mass makes a very good point as to how perspective controls what makes us a garbage person or not. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear my mind being blown as he states an obvious point that I suppose I never closely considered.
I feel like any person could be a really good person or a garbage person, depending on what's going on, depending on, you know what I mean? There are some people who, there are women who would have this conversation about you, would point out this time where they were talking to this guy who went out on a date with them, didn't say anything, and then never texted them back or never called them again and blocked them on their social media. And then you might have a conversation with another woman who says, I met this guy on an app. He's the nicest guy in the world. I love him so much. And one of those women would be an ex, and one of them would be my current girlfriend. And so to some of them, I'm a garbage person.
Wow.
You know what I mean? To some of them, I am sludge. And to my girlfriend, I'm like a prince. And, I think it's really just where that person is. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like I feel like you're constantly evolving and changing with every minute, and just somebody caught you at a bad minute or a good minute. You were in a good place in your life or a bad place in your life. You cared about certain things or you didn't care about anything. And you know what I mean? I think that's really, I think it's not fair to call a person, one person just a garbage person in their entirety. You were garbage at that moment, and I need you to get away from me and never see me again. But for somebody else, you will be in the right place, and they will be in the right place.
Being in the right place. This immediately reminded me of a conversation I had with someone else who mentioned that finding your person means going about your daily life and keeping your eyes peeled for someone who is already engaging in the things you love.
Your church, your grocery shopping, your apartment complex, your furniture shopping. I mean, that's where you're going to meet people or a person that, you might be interested in dating. This wide pool of people out there, you have to be careful.
So my mom is advising me on being careful in selection and keeping my eyes peeled day to day. I think based on stories I've heard from Jessica, my sister, and other women and men in general, I think part of what's broken about dating in our generation is the ability to meet someone. We seem to be stuck in the technological advances of meeting large quantities of people without being able to meet quality people. Further in my conversation with Mass, he began to talk about the investment some men make in dating. This investment lends some responsibility to women before saying yes or no to a date.
It's expected of the person who's asking you on a date to be the person who is paying for it, in my opinion, but I think that's pretty normal. I would say the greater majority of people would agree with that. And typically the person who asks you on a date is going to be the man. And I would say, I think women have a responsibility that if they're not really interested in you, to either reel the date back, right? If a gentleman asks you out to dinner or he asks you out to someone to a play or something like that, for you to say, well, let's go get coffee. You know what I mean? I just feel like that's responsible. I know a lot of times women don't like being told what to do or having a man mansplain anything to them, which I get. But I feel like there's a responsibility to not have this guy waste his time and money. And I know that for women and for romantics, they'll say, well, it shouldn't be all about the money, right? But for a lot of guys, being as a man, right, how much money you make and how much money you make and what you're able to do with your resources that you have is part of your manhood, right? To be able to provide eventually. So to be able to provide for yourself, to be able to provide for people who don't necessarily have a responsibility to you, and then to be able to provide for people who do have a responsibility to you. And in the same way, I can't expect, for us to be physical on our first date, or I can't expect for you to just automatically be into me, or any expectation I can't have for you. You kind of also have to know that I'm not here to just pay for your food, and I need you to know that that's what will happen if you agree and aren't interested. Like, don't agree and not be interested. I don't mind paying for the food of somebody who was interested and is no longer, but I do have a problem paying for the food of somebody who was never interested. And I think that's the parallel. And I hear people responding and saying, you're way too focused on this $50 or this $100. And I just feel like that's unrealistic. I feel like the reality of the reality is it's $100, it's $50, and I could not spend it and put it in my savings account, or I can go on a date with somebody who I potentially could have something important with. And for that reason, it's worth it until you waste it.
Until you waste it. This brings me back to thinking about my time again. Where exactly do I spend the bulk of it? Doing the things I want to do with people I want to see, or wasting both it and money on ventures that won't ever pan out? I guess choose wisely. Time Well Spent with Ronald is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Creative support from Michael Ulysses Jefferson. Theme music provided by royalty-free music from Ben Sound. Special thanks to Peggy Lee Young, Marilyn Denise Young, Jessica Taylor, and Michael Ulysses Jefferson. Time Well Spent will return in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening. While creating this episode, it seemed important to at least touch on the political climate. I'm no expert. People follow me on Facebook. I pretty much say what's on my mind. Sometimes I say the right thing. Sometimes I say the wrong thing. I think I have a clear slant or feeling or angle about how I feel about things. I don't want to get too specific here, but I do want to say I think it's important that everyone pays attention. It's easier now than ever to ignore what's going on in the White House, ignore what's going on in Congress, and go about your daily lives as if nothing has changed. However, this simply isn't the case. We're living in a state that we haven't seen before. We're dealing with decisions that we haven't seen before, said in a way that we've never heard before by people who have no business making these decisions. Now, of course, I could get really specific and start naming names and talking about the things that I hate. And if you want to see more of that, you could follow me on Facebook. However, I just think it's important that everyone pays attention to what's going on. Don't make the assumption that everything's going to go back to normal. Don't make the assumption that tomorrow you're going to wake up and the United States will be the United States and nothing else has changed. Don't make that assumption. Pay attention. And if necessary, take action. He's already back there, so it works out perfectly. Nothing.
So, this that mic ain't gonna mess with y'all?
No, it should be fine. Why, you about to warm up something?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.